Here's something that should terrify you. Right now, somewhere on this planet, a farmer is staring at a field that used to be fertile and watching it crack open like dry skin. And somewhere else, a warehouse the size of a football stadium is growing strawberries without soil, without sunlight, and without a single drop of rain. These two realities exist at the same time, on the same earth, in the same year. And the question that keeps agricultural scientists up at night is simple. Which one wins? Because here's the thing nobody tells you. The way we grow food is quietly breaking. Not in a slow, we'll deal with it later kind of way. In a right now, this decade kind of way. The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization confirmed that in 2024, an estimated 673 million people experienced hunger. That's not a crisis approaching. That's a crisis already living with us. But this video isn't about doom. It's about what's coming next. And trust me, the answer is nothing like what you're picturing. Let's start where all food starts, in the dirt. Most people have never thought about how old the soil under a farm actually is. You'd assume it regenerates. You'd assume it's always there. But real agricultural topsoil, the biologically active, nutrient-rich layer that actually grows food, takes roughly 1,000 years to form 1 inch. 1 inch, and we're losing it at a rate of about 24 billion tons a year, according to the UN. Read that again. 24 billion tons a year. And this isn't a distant problem. Parts of the American Midwest, the region that feeds enormous portions of the world, have already lost over half their original topsoil in just over a century of intensive farming. The land that once defined American agricultural dominance is quietly thinning out. Now here's where it gets complicated, because the response to soil degradation isn't what you'd expect. You might assume farmers are just farming less or farming smarter. But the actual picture is more dramatic than that. The global population is expected to hit around 9.7 billion by 2050, which means farmers don't have the luxury of stepping back. They have to feed more people with less land and increasingly unpredictable weather. That's not a farming problem. That's a civilizational problem disguised as a farming problem. So what do you do when the ground itself is working against you? You do something that would have sounded insane to a farmer in 1960. You go up. Imagine you walked into a building in downtown Newark, New Jersey. You're expecting offices, maybe a restaurant. What you actually find is rows upon rows of leafy greens stacked 14 stories high, bathed in purple LED light, growing in a mist of precisely calibrated nutrients, and not a speck of soil anywhere in the building. That's a real place. It's called Aero Farms, and it's one of the most advanced vertical farms in the world. And before you file this away as a quirky tech novelty, here's the number that stops people cold. Vertical farms can produce up to 230 times more crop yield per square foot than traditional farming. Not 10% more, not double, 230 times more. That figure isn't marketing. It comes from industry analysis comparing yield per unit of land. The vertical farming market was valued at around $8.7 billion in 2025. By 2035, analysts project it could exceed $65 billion. That's not a trend. That's a structural shift in how humanity produces food. But here's the tension nobody talks about. Vertical farming has a problem, a big one: energy. These facilities run on enormous amounts of electricity for lighting, climate control, water systems. Right now, the economics only make sense for high-value crops, leafy greens, herbs, strawberries, tomatoes. You're not feeding the world with kale towers. The staple crops, wheat, rice, maize, the things that actually keep billions of people alive, those still need open fields, soil, and sky. So the real question isn't will vertical farming replace traditional farming, it's can the two systems work together fast enough? And that's where things get genuinely fascinating. Here's something most people have never heard of. NDVI mapping. It stands for Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. And if that sounds like something from a physics lecture, let me translate it for you. Satellites orbiting Earth are scanning farm fields right now, analyzing the wavelengths of light reflected back from crops. From space, they can tell a farmer which exact section of a field is stressed, which patch is nitrogen deficient, and which row is about to be hit by fungal disease, before the human eye could ever see it. This is called precision agriculture, and it's not experimental. According to industry analysis, more than 60% of American farms were expected to adopt precision agriculture tools by 2025. The technology includes GPS-guided autonomous tractors, drone-deployed pesticides targeted at individual infected plants, and AI systems that analyze soil composition and make planting recommendations in real time. The result? Precision agriculture has been shown to boost crop yields by up to 25 to 30%. That might sound modest, but across the world's farmland, a 25% efficiency gain means hundreds of millions of additional people fed using the same amount of land. And this is where the story gets emotional, because behind all this technology, there are real people. The average age of a farmer in the United Kingdom is 59. In the United States, it's 57.5. In many parts of the world, young people are leaving rural areas because farming has been for generations grueling, unpredictable, and often not financially sustainable. The promise of precision agriculture isn't just efficiency. For a lot of farmers, it's survival. It's the difference between a family keeping land that's been theirs for a century or selling it. A farmer in Iowa once said in an interview that GPS-guided planting cut his seed costs by 15% in a single season. That doesn't sound like a revolution. But when your margins are already razor-thin, 15% can be the difference between a good year and a devastating one. Now we need to talk about something that makes people uncomfortable. Something with a history of controversy, public fear, and genuine ethical debate. Genetic modification. But wait, before you form an opinion, let me tell you about something that's actually different from what most people imagine when they hear that phrase. It's called CRISPR. And scientists aren't using it the way the old GM debates were framed, splicing animal DNA into plants, or making crops dependent on proprietary chemicals. CRISPR allows scientists to edit a plant's own genes with extraordinary precision, like finding a single typo in a 1,000-page book and correcting it. By 2025, CRISPR tools were enabling the development of crop varieties that are more tolerant to drought, heat, and salt in the soil. In a world where climate change is shifting rainfall patterns and increasing temperatures across key growing regions, that's not just useful, it's urgent. Think about this. Syria's crop production is currently down 60% compared to pre-conflict levels, according to the World Food Programme. Parts of East Africa face recurring droughts that wipe out harvests entirely. If you could breed a wheat variety that survives on half the water and withstands temperatures 5 degrees higher, you're not just doing science. You're writing a different future for millions of people. And the scale of what's coming is staggering. The World Bank's latest projections suggest fertilizer prices will rise by 31% on average in 2026, a direct consequence of geopolitical instability disrupting supply chains. When fertilizer becomes unaffordable, small-scale farmers, who make up a huge proportion of the world's food producers, get hit hardest. CRISPR-developed crops that require fewer chemical inputs aren't a luxury, they're a lifeline. Here's something that fundamentally changes how you think about where your food comes from. Over 1 billion people on Earth rely on farming for their livelihood. That's roughly 28% of the entire global workforce. And the vast majority of them are not the industrial megafarmers you might picture when you hear the word agriculture. They are smallholders, families farming plots of land smaller than 2 hectares, a smallholder farmer in rural Kenya, a rice paddy family in Vietnam, a cocoa grower in Ghana whose entire annual income rests on a single harvest. These people are the backbone of the global food system, and they are, by and large, the least equipped to deal with the dual threats of climate instability and rising input costs. Now, here's the twist. Technology is starting to reach them, and not through expensive hardware they can't afford, through their phones. Agricultural AI platforms accessible via smartphone are allowing smallholder farmers to receive personalized crop management advice, weather predictions, and market price data. In regions where agricultural extension services are stretched thin or non-existent, an algorithm on a cheap handset is functioning as the agronomist these farmers never had access to. It's imperfect, it's uneven, but it's happening, and faster than most development economists predicted 5 years ago. The indoor farming market, meanwhile, is expanding beyond the global north. The Middle East, a region not traditionally associated with agriculture, is investing heavily. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Israel are funding vertical farm projects specifically designed for arid environments, because when you have almost no arable land and almost no fresh water, growing food indoors with 90% less water than conventional farming isn't a choice. It's existential. Let's zoom out one final time. In 2025, for the first time in the recorded history of the Global Report on Food Crises, a report that has been published for 10 consecutive years, 2 simultaneous famines were confirmed, one in parts of Gaza, one in Sudan. The same year, at the same time. That has never happened before in this century. And the projections for 2026 are not reassuring. A 61 to 87% probability of El Niño conditions emerging by mid-2026, according to the World Bank, could threaten rice output in South Asia by 20 to 50%. Rice, the crop that feeds more people than any other on Earth. This is the world that farming has to navigate. Geopolitical conflict disrupting supply chains. A climate that is becoming less predictable by the season. A global population that keeps growing. And an aging farming workforce that is not being replaced fast enough. Here's what I want you to take from all of this. Farming is not a relic. It is not a solved problem. It is not background noise to modern life. It is the most consequential challenge of the coming decades, dressed up in mud boots and satellite imagery and glowing hydroponic towers. The researchers developing drought-resistant seeds. The engineers optimizing LED spectra for vertical farm lettuce. The AI developers building crop advisory tools for a Kenyan smallholder. The 57-year-old Iowa farmer learning to read a soil moisture sensor dashboard. They are all working on the same problem, from completely different angles, and the outcome isn't written yet. The story of farming is the story of human adaptation. 10,000 years ago, we figured out how to stop chasing food and start growing it, and that single shift built every civilization that came after. We're at another one of those moments, not because the old ways failed completely, but because the world they were built for has changed faster than the methods have. The farms of the next 50 years will look nothing like the farms of the last 50. Some of them won't have soil. Some won't have sunlight. Some will be managed by algorithms that can see things no human eye can catch. But the thing driving all of it, the hunger, the ingenuity, the refusal to let the next generation go without, that part is as old as agriculture itself. If this changed how you think about where your food comes from, share it. Because this is one of those topics that deserves more than a passing thought.